The red sun of Crater 9 hung like a dying ember in the copper sky, casting long shadows across the training yard where gravity pressed down with the weight of destiny. The air itself seemed thick, shimmering with heat and the metallic tang of alien atmosphere. Dust particles hung suspended, glowing in the harsh light like fireflies trapped in amber. She stood at the edge of the assembly ground, hands clasped behind her back, fingers interlaced in a way that hid their trembling. Around her, the other cadets towered, augmented humans with chrome-plated limbs that gleamed like weapons, and alien species whose smallest members still stood a head taller than her slight frame. The Vrexian to her left possessed 4 arms corded with muscle that looked like braided steel cables. The Korthak beyond him had skin like living armor, each plate overlapping the next in evolutionary perfection. And then there was her, barely 5'3" in her boots, hands that looked like they belonged to a musician or an artist, not a soldier. Delicate wrists that seemed too fragile to even hold a standard-issue plasma rifle without snapping like kindling. The mockery had started 3 weeks ago, on her first day at the Interstellar Defense Initiative training compound. It came in whispers at first, the sidelong glances, the barely concealed smirks when she struggled to don the standard exosuit designed for bodies twice her mass. Then it grew louder, more confident, more cruel. "Look at those hands," a voice had sneered during mess hall rotation. "Like bird bones. She'll break the first time she tries to chamber around." "Why did Command even accept her?" another had muttered. "Humanity's supposed to prove we belong in the Alliance, and they send us this." She'd learned to keep her eyes forward, to let the words slide off like rain on plasteel. But every syllable had carved itself into her memory, fuel for fires that burned in places no one else could see. Now, standing in formation as drill coordinator Kyle Thor, a 9-foot Xinthian whose voice could shatter transparasteel, began the day's briefing. She felt the familiar weight of contempt pressing down harder than Crater 9's crushing gravity. His 3 eyes swept across the assembled cadets, luminescent and cold. "Today's exercise," Kyle Thor announced, his words resonating through the translation implants each cadet wore, "is designed to separate the capable from the expendable. You will face the Ascension drill, high-gravity resistance training under combat conditions. Those who cannot maintain pace will be cycled out of the program." A murmur rippled through the formation. The Ascension drill was legendary, a gauntlet that combined Crater 9's natural 2.3 times standard gravity with additional gravitational amplifiers. Cadets wore weighted exoframes that didn't assist movement but instead simulated carrying full combat loads through hostile terrain. She felt eyes on her again, heard the barely suppressed laughter. "This should be entertaining," someone whispered loud enough to carry. The drill began with brutal simplicity. Run 5 kilometers across the desert wastes. Maintain formation. Don't fall. Those who collapsed would be left to crawl to the finish line or fail out entirely. The first kilometer separated the weak from the adequate. An augmented human with hydraulic leg replacements stumbled, his enhanced limbs unable to compensate for the crushing weight. He went down face first in the rust-colored sand, servos whining in protest. The second kilometer claimed 2 Vrexians whose confidence had exceeded their endurance. They fell like toppled statues, all 4 arms splayed in defeat. She was still running, small frame pressed low to the ground, each breath a controlled meditation. Her hands, those fragile, mocked hands, pumped rhythmically at her sides, fingers curled just so to minimize wind resistance. She'd learned efficiency in a universe that rewarded power. Learned to make every motion count when you had no strength to waste. Behind her she heard gasping, retching, the sound of bodies surrendering to gravity's relentless pull. She kept running. By the 3rd kilometer even the strongest were struggling. The Korthak with his armored hide had slowed to a grinding march, each step an act of defiance against physics. The formation had disintegrated into a scattered line of survivors, each locked in private warfare with their own limitations. She maintained her pace, steady, unchanging. A heartbeat made motion. How is she still moving? The question drifted through her translation implant, tinged with disbelief. It's impossible. Look at her. There's nothing to her. When they finally reached the training yard center, 23 cadets had been reduced to 11. She stood among them, sweat-soaked and trembling but upright. Her hands hung at her sides, steady now, fingers loose and ready. Kyle Thor surveyed the survivors with something that might have been approval in a species capable of such expression. "Adequate," he rumbled. "Now comes the true test. From the sand, rising on hydraulic pillars that screamed with mechanical effort, came the training pod. It was a monument to mass and engineering, a 15-ton sphere of compressed alloys and reinforced plating, designed to simulate the weight of a crashed dropship. Rescue protocols required soldiers to move such obstacles in the field when equipment failed, required strength that bordered on superhuman. Each of you will attempt to lift and stabilize the pod using only your physical capability and exoframe. No additional equipment, no team effort, individual assessment only. Kael'thor's eyes glinted with something predatory. This is where we learn what you're truly made of. The Korthak went first. He approached the pod with the confidence of his species' reputation, arms wrapping around the massive structure, plates of his natural armor sliding and locking into optimal lifting position. He strained. Servos in his exoframe whined. The pod shifted, perhaps an inch, before settling back with a ground-shaking thud. He stepped back, frustrated but not defeated. Acceptable effort, Kael'thor noted without emotion. One by one, they tried. The Vrexians with their four-armed advantages. The augmented humans with their chrome-plated limbs and enhanced muscle fibers. Each managed to shift the pod slightly, some more than others, but none achieved the full lift that the exercise demanded, raising it to chest height and holding stability for 3 seconds. She watched, studied, saw how they approached it with assumptions of brute force, saw where they placed their hands, their feet, their center of gravity, saw every inefficiency, every wasted erg of energy. When her turn came, the yard fell silent in a way that was worse than mockery. It was the silence of anticipated failure, the silence of a foregone conclusion. She approached the pod slowly, those delicate hands reaching out to touch the sun-heated metal. Her fingers traced across its surface, reading it like braille, finding stress points, seams, the architectural language of its construction. "This is a waste of time," someone muttered. "She can't even reach around it properly." She found her grip points. Not where the others had tried. Not the obvious handholds or the ergonomic depressions designed for standard physiology. She placed her left hand on an upper seam where 2 alloy plates met, a junction point where the pod's weight concentrated. Her right hand, her supposedly fragile bird-bone right hand, rested at her side, fingers flexing once, twice. Then she began to lift. It started with her legs. Thighs burning, calves straining, every muscle fiber recruited into the effort. Her back straightened with geometric precision, spine aligned to channel force directly through her core. Her left arm trembled, tendons standing out like cables beneath skin that seemed too thin to contain such effort. The pod groaned, shifted. And then, impossible, undeniable, witnessed by 11 pairs of stunned eyes, it began to rise, not inches, not a partial lift or a desperate heave. It rose smoothly, controlled, as if gravity itself had forgotten its purpose. Her right hand remained at her side, not touching the pod, not assisting. Just her left arm, extended now, holding 15 tons of training equipment at chest height with a steadiness that defied physics. Her right hand wasn't hanging idle, though. The careful observers would have noticed, if they'd been watching instead of gaping, that her fingers were moving. Precise. Rapid. Microsecond adjustments to something embedded in her palm. Something that glowed with faint blue light beneath the skin. 3 seconds. She held it for 3 seconds that stretched into eternity. Her face was a mask of concentration, sweat running in rivulets down her temples. But her eyes were clear, focused, filled with the memory of every insult, every dismissal, every moment she'd been deemed insufficient. When she set the pod down, it settled without impact. Gentle, controlled, the same way she'd lifted it. The silence that followed was absolute. She stepped back, her hands at her sides again, fingers curled loosely. Her chest heaved with exertion, but she remained standing while others had collapsed from lesser efforts. Kael'thor moved forward, his 3 eyes fixed on her with an intensity that could have melted steel. "Explain," he commanded. She'd known this moment would come. Had prepared for it during sleepless nights in her quarters, rehearsing words in her mind. "Genetic modification," she said, voice steady despite her labored breathing. "Not augmentation, not cybernetics. Bioengineered myofibril density at the cellular level. Bone structure reinforced with carbon lattice proteins. Nervous system optimized for strength to mass efficiency." She held up her right hand, letting the faint blue glow beneath the skin pulse once. "And a gravity manipulator biointegrated into my palm structure." Designed by human researchers who understood that in a galaxy of giants, we needed to think differently. You cheated, a voice accused. The augmented human who'd mocked her hands during mess rotation. I evolved, she corrected, turning to face him. Your augmentations are bolted on, temporary, removable. Mine are woven into every cell. I don't wear my strength. I am my strength. Kyle Thor's mandibles clicked, a sound that might have been approval or calculation. This technology, other humans possess it. Some, she admitted. The program is selective. Candidates must demonstrate compatibility, physical, psychological. A pause. The modifications hurt. For months. And they continue to hurt. Every day is recalibration. Every day is teaching your body to contain forces it wasn't designed to hold. She looked at her hands again. Those fragile, delicate, mocked hands that had just lifted the weight of disbelief. We're the newest species in the Alliance, she continued, her voice carrying across the silent yard. The smallest, the weakest by every conventional metric. So we learned to rewrite the metrics. You see fragility? I see potential energy. You see limitation. I see opportunity for innovation. The Korthak who'd gone first stepped forward, his armored face unreadable. You let us try first. Let us fail. Why? Because I needed you to understand something. She met his gaze without flinching. Humanity isn't here to match your strength. We're here to redefine what strength means. Kael'thor circled her slowly, his massive frame casting shadows that swallowed her slight form. How many more like you exist? Enough, she answered cryptically. And more in development, each generation refined, each iteration stronger, faster, more efficient. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. You built this training to break us, to prove we don't belong. But you're training to our specifications now. High gravity, endurance challenges, exercises designed to test the limits of the human body in extremis. She gestured at the pod. And we're passing. The drill coordinator stopped circling, his three eyes narrowing in what might have been respect or concern. Command will hear of this. The Alliance Council will demand explanations. Let them, she replied. We've been explaining ourselves since we reached for the stars. Since we refused to accept that our place was dirt-bound and limited. Her voice grew harder, edged with steel that matched her bones. Every species in the Alliance looked at humanity and saw primitives. Saw soft bodies and short lifespans. Saw prey animals playing at civilization. She stepped closer to the massive alien, craning her neck to meet his gaze. But prey animals don't stop evolving just because predators exist. We adapted. We changed. We became something new. One by one, the other cadets approached. Not to congratulate. That would come later perhaps, or perhaps never. But to see. To examine this impossible thing standing before them. This girl with artist's hands who'd lifted mountains. The augmented human who'd accused her of cheating stood closest, his chrome limbs catching the red sun's light. The pain you mentioned. The daily recalibration. Is it worth it? She considered the question with the weight it deserved. Every morning I wake up feeling like my skeleton is trying to escape through my skin. Every night I run diagnostics on systems that shouldn't exist in human biology. The gravity manipulator in my palm requires constant maintenance. The reinforced bone structure creates phantom sensations. Ghost pains where my body remembers what it used to be. She paused. But then I come here. I stand in formation with beings who evolved under crushing gravity or augmented themselves with the finest technology in the galaxy. And I match them, exceed them. Her hands unclenched, fingers spreading to show the faint traceries of bioluminescent circuitry beneath her skin. So yes, it's worth it. Every moment of agony. Every day of becoming something more than what I was. Kael'thor raised one massive arm, a gesture that commanded attention from the assembled cadets. Dismissed, all of you, except you. He pointed at her with a talon that could have pierced armor. Stay. The others filed away, casting backward glances, some calculating, some resentful, all irrevocably changed by what they'd witnessed. When the yard was empty save for coordinator and cadet, he spoke again. The Alliance has rules about genetic modification, limits, safety protocols. Human space operates under human law, she countered. We submitted to your training protocols, your evaluation standards. But how we prepare our citizens for service is our sovereign right. The coordinator's mandibles clicked again. A rhythm that suggested deep thought. You understand what you've started here. Other species will demand access to this technology. or demand humans be restricted from service. The council sessions will be chaos. She nodded slowly. Change always creates chaos. But humanity didn't join the alliance to maintain the status quo. We joined to prove we belong among the stars. She looked up at the copper sky, where transport ships hung like metal birds waiting to carry soldiers to wars on worlds she'd never seen. And if that means breaking every comfortable assumption about power and potential, then we'll break them all. Kael'thor studied her for a long moment, his alien features inscrutable. Then, in a tone that might have been the closest his species came to admiration, he said, "You're either going to change everything, or destroy everything." "Perhaps both," she agreed. "That's what evolution does." He dismissed her with a wave, turning toward the command center, but before she could take 3 steps, his voice stopped her. "What do you want me to call you? For my report. Your designation." She turned back, those delicate hands flexing at her sides, the bioluminescent traces pulsing with her heartbeat. "Project Acheron. First generation. Field designation." A pause, considering what name would follow her into history. "Wraith 7. "Wraith," Kael'thor repeated. "A ghost. Something that shouldn't exist but does." "Exactly." She walked across the training yard, each step carrying her through sand that still held the impression of the fallen. The red sun cast her shadow long and thin across the desert, a dark blade cutting through copper light. Behind her the training pod sat silent, monument to impossible things made real through will and pain, and the relentless human refusal to accept limitation. Somewhere overhead, beyond the thick atmosphere of Crater 9, the stars waited, and among them, humanity was rewriting its own definition, one fragile hand at a time.